Right action is part of the sila, or virtue aspect of the Eightfold Path. It consists of three primary precepts for lay people. These are no killing, no stealing, and no sexual misconduct. However, it must be assumed that all five precepts of Buddhism also apply to this limb of the Eightfold Path. The rest being no lying, no deceiving, and no consumption of intoxicants. Right action is the result of having the right perspective and understanding of things. It is to have morals and act accordingly to them. Just because somebody doesn't do bad things doesn't mean that they are intrinsically moral. One's ability to maintain right action depends on the quality of their mind and their comprehension of existential truths. An infant, for example, generally doesn't have the ability to commit wrong actions, but still carries the potential to do this once he or she grows older. There was a tragedy that happened in Tibet, in a village a very long time ago, because the monks were not certain in how to maintain right action whilst following the ahimsa observance, which is the observance of non-harm. What happened was the village got raided by an army of bandits, and the monks, thinking that they shouldn't do anything about it because it could cause harm, let it all just happen. This was a terrible mistake. This was not right action. Passively letting everything just happen in life is not the right way to practice renunciation and ahimsa. All observances and precepts require some level of skillfulness. Self-defense, for example, is a necessary practice. We need to protect ourselves in all the different aspects of our lives. Lay people need to earn and save money in order to survive. All of us need to eat and exercise in order to stay alive and healthy. And likewise, we need to act on self-defense whenever faced with physical threats. It would otherwise be a complete waste of the human opportunity to give up all of one's resources and time just for the sake of renunciation or for the sake of non-violence. The first precept, no killing, reflects the ahimsa principle. The philosophy means to avoid physical harm whilst developing compassion, respect, and a sense of interconnectedness with all living beings. This precept is not only concerned with intentional killing, but also includes actions that indirectly cause harm to sentient beings. This can include harmful occupations, harmful activities, and neglect that leads to suffering and death. This is very important to understand because most of us are not murderers, but some of us work in places like slaughterhouses, or meat factories, gun factories, cigarette factories, or the military. So the karma involved in these occupations can range between first-degree murder and second-hand manslaughter, in which deaths are occurring unintentionally due to the third-party assistance employees are providing in these kinds of companies. A soldier in the military, for example, is not exempt from the karma that accrues from killing enemy soldiers at war just because the soldier was doing his or her job. The severity of karma accrued from killing varies more significantly depending on factors like whether or not the murderer was first degree, assisted second-hand, unintentional, a suicide, or whether the victim was an insect, an animal, or a human being. Other forms of murder include euthanasia, which is the consented murder of a suffering or old person performed by a doctor, and abortion. However, choosing to not prolong life is not murder. The consequences of murder tend to be early death or the same or similar murder against the killer in the next life. It is one of the most serious crimes in Buddhism because it's understood that the act of taking the life of another being prematurely delays their opportunity to work on themselves spiritually. The second precept is no stealing. Aside from avoiding the inconveniences and karma that comes from stealing things, another purpose of this precept is to develop contentment, generosity, respect for others, and as well respect or dignity for oneself. This is the philosophy behind any kind of stealing. Even if it's something very small, like a pen from a big business you work for, it's not always about the inconvenience that the stealing causes for others. It's about having the integrity and dignity to not selfishly deceive and cheat people through lying and stealing. Stealing is below your dignity as an ethical person. It is only in extreme cases that when one's health or life is threatened, when stealing things like medicine becomes reasonable. Sexual misconduct is the third precept. For lay people, this precept encourages students to only engage in sexual relationships that maintain integrity, consent, and respect. The extent of brahmacharya, or sexual purity, that must be observed varies for lay people, depending on the level one is at. Guidance can be received in meditation or by a guru. The most fundamental rule in sexual purity that all religions teach is chastity, the abstinence from sex in the form of fornication. Then there is the sexual purity that must be maintained for couples who are practicing suprasexuality or tantra. This primarily requires abstaining from having the orgasm and other unnecessary and perverted sexual behaviors. Buddhism doesn't say much about same-sex relationships or marriages, other than explaining that same-sex relationships are not conducive to any kind of creation. Certain texts include rules against cheating on one's spouse, having more than one partner at a time, and other obvious things like sexual harassment and sexual abuse. These things are not acceptable. Sexual rules provide us with a sense of safety, so things like the legal age of consent is more like a property law that prevents people from stealing each other's personal space. For monastics or anyone under a Dharma, which in this context is a precept or philosophy from a particular religious school, these must be given due regard. Sexual actions are distinct from all other actions that can be taken. The orgasm is the most powerful expulsion of pranic energy that a being can release. Thus, sexual actions have more impact on our energetic body than other kinds of actions. Furthermore, the karma that arises out of sex is non-negotiable. This means that any consequences, whether good or bad, must be received and paid in all of its rigor. In serious cases when sex karma becomes very severe, the only way to avoid terrible retributions is to request internally for your guides to steal your karma for you. This is not an easy procedure. Only those who are sincere and work hard on the path deserve to receive this kind of secret help. So do not rely on stealing karma as a means of getting away with sexual actions. It is a last resort.